when and how should we be using these scenarios? Basically, it's very boring, and learners find it difficult to engage with content which is just cut and dry and just presented as policies or just, mandates. But when you put the learner in thought provoking situations, then it helps them to apply what they have learned to various contexts. And it helps them to see how those policies apply. And you can use the feedback for the options to teach all the implications of the wrong consequences. And in fact, this is very effective, especially if there is resistance on the learner's part to learning any area. Now, typically, the moment you say compliance training, I think most learners groan because they are mostly experienced with, you know, a lot of content being dumped on them and them being expected to remember the policies and so on. But put them into compelling scenarios, and retention is automatically going to shoot up. Soft skills training, communication, behavioral training, these are also very good areas where we can use scenarios, because these are areas of training which involve nuances. There are gray areas, there are sensitive topics, and it's very important for the learner to understand these nuances. And sometimes there is no single correct answer. So, what works best is you put the learner into various situations in which they have to select their course of action. They have to first interpret it, then select their best course of action based on what they already know. And then they make their choice going ahead. So we can use branching scenarios, especially in soft skills and behavioral and communication training, to mirror how the learner's responses in a situation can also influence the other people involved in that situation. So not only is the learner told, what are the implications, but you actually see it being played out when the other person also responds. So it is like building up a mini story with a beginning, an interesting middle, and an ideal end. Because these are things which involve a lot of practice. So, analyzing a situation and determining the best action based on broad principles. Now, this is something where, it forces the learner to engage and to think, and it challenges their preconceived notions. It clears misconceptions, and it also tells them what are the various possible outcomes. So these are very useful. Scenarios here are very useful to help the learners not just know what is the best selection, but also help them understand how they can use the correct criteria, which would be covered through the training content, in arriving at the best possible decision. And if you're presenting a scenario before you're teaching the content, that is also a very good way to get the learner to think through a problem, and then you present through the feedback and through the subsequent pages that follow why the choice was either right or wrong. So that's another way where you lead with a scenario and then you use it as a bridge to the teaching content that follows. And another area where scenarios are very effective are those kind of trainings where there's high risk. You cannot afford to let the learner make a mistake on, for example, on a shop floor, where certain trainings can be risky, expensive, or maybe it's not possible to simulate that situation and let the learners see for themselves what the consequences are. So scenario-based training is very useful here because it exposes the learner to likely situations and helps them do all this in a risk-free environment. I think most of us agree that scenarios are great and we should be using them. But there are situations where it is best to avoid using scenarios. I would like to just spend a minute here to take you through why using scenarios for these kind of trainings may not be the best possible option. Now, for example, if you have a procedural or process training, it's a very routine kind of step-by-step procedure or a step-by-step process, which basically requires learners to do something, a series of tasks in a given sequence. So there really is no ambiguity about what should be the next step. And the outcomes again are very predictable because there is a right and a wrong way to do something. So this is something where you might want to avoid using scenarios, because for such trainings, a simple, linear, straightforward approach works best. Now, I know that some of us selected new hire training, but again, you might want to see if, using scenarios is really the best use of the time and effort for such a training. Because typically, for a new hire training, learners are expected to learn about their company's vision, mission, culture, the values, the practices, the departments, the SOPs, policies, and so on. Now, this is fairly straightforward, and since a new hire to the organization is coming with uh, not with any familiarity with what they are going to engage with, using scenarios here would be an overkill, because you're presenting this information to them for the first time, and it's not that they can use their critical thinking skills to select the best choice in a given situation, because these things vary from organization to organization, or for the most part. So this is something where you may want to avoid using scenario based training, because it might be a bit of an overkill. Now, the same thing applies to foundational training on any topic as well. Now, the thing with scenarios is that they assume that the learner is coming to the learning with some level of knowledge, some level of existing knowledge about that particular topic, so that they can apply that knowledge and arrive at the best possible choice in a given situation. But if the learners are entirely new to the subject, a structured linear path for learning is the best. Now, this again works effectively because it helps the learner to build on their existing knowledge step by step. So instead of just giving them various possibilities and telling them to select something and then explore the possibilities, you're giving them a very systematic, progressive approach, a chance to progressively build on their existing knowledge. So for foundational training on any topic, you may want to avoid scenario-based training.